Yo, what's up? I'm the chess guy and welcome to the video. I'm so excited to finally finish this video and show it to you. This video has 100 chess tips that will help you to get better or improve at the game. So I really hope you enjoy. This video is divided into 5 parts. We'll start with some general tips, moving on to the opening, middle game, end game. And then we're finishing it off with some famous chess quotes. So big shout out to the first 100 subscribers that made this video happen. And I hope you enjoy. So let's get started. Solve tactics every day for at least 30 minutes. This will help you familiarize yourself with all the different type of tactics, making it easier to focus on solving this kind of tactics that you're weak at and that you miss in your own games. I personally use chess.com and both the actual website as well as the mobile app. Other known platforms are Chess Tempo, Lichess, Chess24, and probably many more if you search well enough. Don't worry about your online rating. There are so many platforms and different time controls, each with their own rating system. The more you focus on your own chess improvement rather than gaining any elo on these platforms, the quicker your playing strength and therefore your rating will go up. Do not expect results overnight, but hard work pays off. Play longer time controls, preferable classical chess, which is usually an hour and a half plus 30 minutes after 40th move, plus 30 seconds every move. Otherwise, play online rapid. Classical chess is the most common type of chess during tournament play, and therefore it's a good practice to start playing this time control. Learn from your mistakes. It's easier said than done, but a good way to start is to write down any lines you calculated in your head and play them out without the engine. Once you think you have reached the final conclusion of your lines you have calculated, you can check these lines with the engine and see if there's anything that you have missed. Chess is a sport, so be a good sport. Treat your opponent with respect and get respect in return. This attitude will also help you keeping an open mind, which is important during chess. Join a chess club. Playing chess regular and getting to know other chess lovers will fuel your drive to improve your game. Likely there are many strong chess players at the club who can teach you a lot, or inspire you to one day beat them. Buy a chess set. You can use this when you're studying, and also when you're playing a long time control online, you can use your physical board to play along with your online game. If you are willing to invest money into your chess development, buying a chess-based license is a very solid investment. Every professional chess player uses this program, among many amateur players, including myself. Play against stronger opponents and ask to analyze the game afterwards. This applies mostly to over-the-board games or club games. It is always useful to get another perspective on the same game, especially from a stronger opponent. You can also join our Discord, with many strong players from all over the world. Research which chess books you should buy. A good way to start is Googling chess books with your current level of play, which could be beginner, intermediate, advanced, master, or titled. Create a database of your own chess games. Ideally, just games with longer time controls should be in this database. Once you have a decent amount of games, it's very useful to find flaws in your play, either certain openings or endgames or middle games. You can find where things go wrong. Chessbase is especially useful for creating your own databases. Know which positions are winning and which ones aren't. There's a thing called the table base, which will tell you exactly if certain positions are winning, drawn, or lost with perfect play. This will work up to any position with 7 pieces, including both kings. Set up technical winning positions or drawn positions and play these out versus the computer. There are plenty of ways to do this. For example, Chessbase or Chess.com have free sources of chess engines. If you are lost during a game of chess, try to complicate matters the most, even if this means you might lose more quickly. There's nothing worse than losing without a fight. Learn the coordinates of the chessboard by heart. Visualize the board in your mind and name any square and tell if this is a dark or light square. A fun little game that helps to improve your visualization skills. Learn chess notation. To practice this and to learn this, you could write down the moves when you're solving in tactics or when you're playing an online game where the moves will appear automatically. If you start playing over-the-board chess in tournaments, writing down moves is mandatory, so you better learn this. Try to stay objective. Always search for the best move. If you see a very tempting line that you know is flawed, don't play it. Unless you're losing, of course. Never show any emotions during the game. If you blundered, your opponent doesn't know until they see the blunder themselves. The opposite can also be true. If your opponent is looking nervous, it usually means they're unsure about their position. Take a better look. Stay practical. If you know you can trade down to a winning endgame without taking any risk, just do it. Enjoy the journey. Chess has been around for a while, and it will be around for many more decades to come. Set realistic goals, depending on your age and free time and your own motivation. Only you can honestly answer this. It's a good idea to have short-term goals, like doing tactics for 1 week and the other week spend time on a specific opening you want to study. Your long-term goals can be rating orientated or becoming the best of your school or club, or maybe even becoming a titled player one day. If possible, play tournaments. This is extremely useful. You will play classical chess, you will play rated games that really feel like something's on the line, you'll have to handle your nerves, the stress during the game, you'll have to write down the moves, and on top of that, you're likely going to have to play against strong opponents, which will give you great chances of analyzing the game and really improve quickly. Learn all the FIDE rules. It might seem obvious, but there's a lot of things you need to know once you start playing over the board. A Google search of FIDE chess rules will send you towards a 25-page PDF, which I highly recommend you read thoroughly. Focus the most on the areas which you're weak at. This could be the opening or middle game, endgame, tactic, strategy, nerves. An honest look at your own games should give you more insight, especially the ones you lost. When you're playing chess and calculating lines, expect your opponent to make the best moves and see if you still like where things are going if they do. Manage your time well. Use your opponent's time, identify critical positions, and spend the time you have given where needed. If your opponent is low on time and the position is unclear, keeping it unclear is in your favor. Don't let your opponent's time trouble influence your own move though. Once again, trying to stay objective and always play for the best move, not the trickiest, unless you're losing. Play each game as if it's the most important game you've ever played. This might sound like a bit much, but taking chess serious and your road to improvement is important if you really want to get better. If you play against weaker opponents, keeping things simple allows you to easily punish mistakes. If you're playing against stronger opponents, keeping things complicated gives you more chances of letting your opponent make the first mistake. This is a general rule of thumb and doesn't mean you should change your playing style or make any decision based upon the rating of your opponent. Use your opponent's time to come up with plans and ideas. Have an idea of which moves to play against various moves your opponent might play without going too deep and spending unnecessary energy when your opponent is thinking. Have an inner dialogue with yourself about the position. Talk to yourself about which pieces are well placed and what their roles could be, or which pieces could be improved. You could also do this from your opponent's perspective to get an idea of what they're intending to do. This helps understanding the position and can guide you into calculating relevant lines. Do the chess personality test. This will give you a good starting point to figure out which opening suits your style. Since white moves first, white tries to get an advantage and black tries to equalize out of the opening. Keeping this in mind can be useful when you're playing black, as getting into an equal position can be seen as a small victory. Don't develop your queen before your minor pieces, meaning your knight and bishop. Getting your queen out too early allows your opponent to continuously attack it while improving their own pieces. Familiarize yourself with these 3 opening principles and make sure it's your second nature to abide by these rules during your opening play. Put your pawn or pawns in the center, develop your minor pieces, get your king into safety, which pretty much always means that you castle. Build a repertoire and make sure you have an idea what to play against the most common responses. If, for example, you play e4 with white, you want to study up on the Sicilian and have an opening ready against e4, e5. Later, you could look at opening like the French, the Caro-Kann, and you can keep adding to your white repertoire as to how you want to play against these openings. With black, you want to start studying openings against both e4 and d4. Avoid moving a piece or pawn twice in the opening. If your opponent does this, keep playing normal moves which are in line with these 3 opening principles. Your chances are likely to come once you finish these opening principles while your opponent has not, leaving them vulnerable to tactics. This theme is called a lead in development, if you want to research this a bit more. Undefended pieces lend themselves perfectly to tactics. Keep that in mind when developing and always be on the lookout for any loose piece, either your own or your opponent's. Familiarize yourself with the standard opening tricks and tactics in the opening. Use this knowledge to avoid opening traps. Do not try these tricks for yourself, because if it doesn't work, you're likely going to be worse off. Don't try to memorize all the opening lines, but at first you should try and focus on understanding the opening ideas from both sides in different lines. This will help you out a lot more than remembering 25 theoretical moves where your opponent will deviate already on move 3. Do memorize the main lines. They are main lines for a reason. They are frequently played and are very likely to appear in your own games. Knowing exactly how and what to play will give you confidence and will set you up for a great game even if you inevitably run out of theoretical moves. Don't avoid certain variations in your repertoire, but study them to become confident when facing these lines. Only do this for the opening lines which are likely to happen. If you still don't feel comfortable on these lines, you might want to reconsider your repertoire a bit. Learn opening names. This will help you when you're looking for books, articles, games, content, etc. Many websites will actually show you the name of the opening. Download Chess Position Trainer to help memorize opening lines. The free version has enough options to do this, and there is a one-time payment if you want the full version. Look up Grandmaster games, games of your specific opening by the greatest players. Annotated games are the best. These are games with explanation and analysis. This will help you understand plans and ideas in your own games. If you don't have ChessBase, there are at least 2 options available online. There's the database chess.com online, and there's the Chess Tempo website. If you're playing Blitz or Bullet online, you might as well use these games to experiment with openings that you find interesting but don't know that well. Losing a couple of games this way due to opening errors is worth it if you can figure out what went wrong and whether or not you would like to study these openings of your choice. Ask stronger or equally strong players to have a couple of friendly matches using a specific line which you've studied, to see how well you've learned a new opening and how you'll handle yourself once you don't know the theory anymore. Free pawns in the openings are usually not free. Be careful when taking them. These pawns are called poison pawns, or it could be actual theory to give up a pawn, which is called gambit. Always ask yourself, what did my opponent's last move threaten? This will help you to avoid blunders. And if you can't find a threat, try to understand why they made the move they did. And once you figure that out, it's easier to find a good response. Calculating in the middle game is very complex, and usually it does not require for you to calculate more than 3 moves. After those 3 moves, you should evaluate the position and then decide if you like that position or not. Stuck which move to make? After you have checked your opponent's last move and potential threat, ask yourself, what is my worst piece? Find a way to improve this piece. Use the candidate moves method before you start calculating deeply. The more you use this method, the faster you can find candidate moves. In general, it shouldn't be more than 3 minutes to find a couple of playable moves. Start with the most promising lines first and work your way down if you're not happy with what you see. Do not trade unless it directly benefits you. An equal trade might not be just equal. Sometimes if you take something, you're helping your opponent to activate your pieces for free, or you're giving them more space or more pawns in the center by just capturing whatever you can. Tension is usually best maintained. Only go for forcing sequences or trade if there are direct benefits to you. So this could be the gain of potential outposts for your knight or activating of your pieces, or more concretely, you're just winning some material. Try to cripple your opponent's pawns by either doubling them, creating isolated pawns, or creating multiple pawn islands. These pawns tend to get weaker and weaker towards the endgame because they can be easily attacked and it's harder to defend these kinds of pawns or pawn islands. Stick to the plan. Assuming you have learned the ideas and plans of the opening you're playing, this will have set you up for the middle game. So if you, for example, play an opening in which you're supposed to get active piece play on the queen side, you should try and focus most of your pieces towards this side of the board, without being blinded to your opponent's ideas and threats, of course. Does your opponent have an isolated pawn thanks to your hard work? Try to block it with a knight. The knight is arguably the best blocking piece, since it's the only piece that can jump over other pieces, and therefore is not restricted by a pawn in front of it. Understand pawn play. This is not easy, but understanding pawn structures will help you greatly improving your understanding of chess, and it will help you to create plans, ideas, and decide upon moves. The pawn structure should be a part of your opening knowledge. Certain opening tends to lead to certain pawn structures. These structures can heavily dictate the course of the game. There's lots of free content out there, but if you're serious about improving, you might want to pick up this book, Understanding Pawn Play in Chess. Heads up, it's not a book for beginners. Familiarize yourself with chess strategy. The middle game is probably the hardest part to study on your own. But just like there are categories for tactics like skewers, pins, double attacks, there's also categories for strategy. Once you know which type of strategies there are, you can find your own way of how to study them, either with books or coaches, annotated master games, whatever works for you. Follow up on the annotated openings from strong players and see how they move their pieces around in the middle game. Make sure you understand why the pieces move to certain squares. Having more space than your opponent means you can move your pieces more freely. This can result into you being able to more quickly redirect your pieces to one side of the board compared to your opponents, which therefore creates unstoppable threats. It's dangerous moving the pawns in front of your king in the middle game. Try to avoid this. Usually h3 and h6 is without consequence and have good reasons to be played. Or if you fianchetto your bishop, you can get away with this, as long as you don't part with this bishop lightly, since it's a great defending piece for your king. Knights belong in or towards the center. Bishops like long open diagonals. Either create them or direct these bishops towards these diagonals. Knights tend to be better in close positions, while bishops are better in open positions. This makes sense, since knights are the only piece that can actually jump over other pieces. So do you have the bishop pair? Try to create open files on diagonals. Similar for the knights, that you should try to keep the position closed if you have knights compared to your opponent who has 1 or 2 bishops. To win winning positions, you need to learn how to checkmate, which you probably already know. To be sure, learn how to checkmate with 2 rooks, a queen, 1 rook. If you have some spare energy, you can learn how to checkmate with 2 bishop and a bishop and knight. Don't worry too much about mating with bishops or bishop and knight, since these are not very likely to happen and are also a bit harder than the previous ones. Once you know certain positions are winning, start practicing these common endgames versus the computer or a real player if possible. It might be boring, but rook endgames are the most common type of endgames. And to help you get started on studying rook endgames, you might want to look up the FIDE position or the Lucena position. Rook endgames with an extra pawn or an outside pawn are very common and should be prioritized when you're studying endgames. Familiarize yourself with Retti's famous king and pawn endgame. You will learn that the king goes as fast diagonal as it goes straight. In endgames, the activity is very important. So sometimes it's better to just give away a pawn if that means your pieces are able to create threats, than to defend passively and wait while your opponent slowly crushes you. Get your rook behind a passed pawn. This is the perfect place for the rook, whether this pawn is yours or your opponent's. Rook belongs on open files. Find them or create them. The king becomes an attacking piece in the endgame, so use your king to get close to the action. If it's possible to cut off your opponent's king, you should do this, because like I said, the king is a useful piece in the endgame, and being able to cut it out of the play means that you have an extra piece to use. An outside passed pawn is extremely dangerous. A possible weak pawn in the middle game on the flank might become a winning asset in the endgame. In king and pawn endgames, a general rule is that the furthest outside passed pawn wins. In knight versus bishop endgames, if there are pawns on both sides, the bishop is usually much better. With pawns on one side of the board, the knight is not worse and can sometimes be better. Endgames are extremely precise. Losing one tempo or one move can be the difference between losing or winning. Draw a square to know if the king is able to catch up to a passed pawn. In a bishop endgame, avoid putting your own pawns on the same color as your bishop. If you force your opponent's pawns on the same color as your bishop, it means that you can attack them. So if possible, you should do this. If there is a pawn race towards promotion, always look ahead on which square the pawn promotes. There might be a check at the end of the line, or there might be an instant way to win the game once you queen. Equal endgames do not mean they are drawn. Stay sharp and capitalize on any endgame mistakes. I call this the bot's AFK, the bishop on 2 squares away from knight. When you have this kind of situation, it means that the bishop will dominate the knight. Sometimes it can be in reverse, but it's usually the bishop that is able to completely minimize the activity of the knight. Always check if there's a way to stalemate to steal the draw, or be aware of any potential stalemate your opponent might pull on you. Be especially vigilant when there is a queen promoting. This could sometimes be an instant stalemate, whereas under promoting to a rook could be winning. In the endgame, there might be weak pawns that you created during the opening or middle game. So if there are weak pawns, you start attacking those right away. Generally, one weakness in an endgame can be drawn by the defending side. 2 weaknesses usually cannot be defended. Push your pawns, without giving them away of course. Pawns that are close to promoting are a real threat and need constant surveillance of your opponent's pieces. A connected passed pawn is a real asset in endgames. Some endgames with a bishop and an outside pawn, the A or H pawn, are drawn. Although engines are very useful finding blunders, they're not always accurate, especially in endgames, so don't value their evaluations too much. One of the most important things in king and pawn endgames is opposition. Make sure you fully understand this concept and apply it in your own games. It's likely that you don't have much time left when you reach the endgame. Having a good technique means you can play quickly without blundering. So make sure you feel confident with, for example, mating with the rook in under a minute, or holding a king versus 1 pawn to a draw under time pressure. When you see a good move, look for a better one. This attitude helps you finding the best move in the position and not taking your moves for granted. Chess is 99% tactics. This famous quote can stir up a good chess debate. To me it means that tactics are essential to win any chess games, and chess games are rarely ever won without using tactics. All that matters on the chessboard is good moves. If you focus on this, then external factors like nerves and pressure are handled more easily and can be overcome. Play the opening like a book, the middle game like a magician, and the endgame like a machine. This beautiful quote speaks for itself. Tactics is knowing what to do when there is something to do. Strategy is knowing what to do when there is nothing to do. When there is a tactic in a chess position, this leads to a clear advantage. Strategy, on the other hand, is hidden more deeply within chess. It is my style to take my opponent and myself onto unknown grounds. The game of chess is not an examination of knowledge, it's a battle of nerves. Assuming with nerves, Bronstein means how people handle themselves in unknown grounds, it is likely that your opponent plays a bad move when they're unfamiliar with the position. Pawns are the soul of the game. Without proper pawn play, your pieces can't be used to their full potential, which is why pawn play is so important. Every chess master was once a beginner. Remember this quote to stay motivated to keep improving your level of chess. A bad plan is better than none at all. Even if a plan is bad and you lose, you will at least understand why you lost, which is a very valuable lesson in chess. If you made it all this way, the final tip should be obvious. Check my Twitch below, click the follow button if you haven't already, and come say hi when I'm live streaming. Thank you so much for being here till the end. I really hope you enjoyed. And big shout outs to my 100 first subscribers and on to many, many more. But yeah, thank you so much. You're going to make this happen and can't wait to see you in the next video. If you made it all the way here and you're not one of the first 100 subscribers, then I would really appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing, since it did take a lot of effort to make this video just for you. And I hope you enjoyed, but since you got all this way, assuming you might really enjoyed it. So thank you and sorry for the plug.